going to continue in the series of stages of life. I am that which I am. I am that which I am. That at the end of the day, Yahweh has blessed us in such a way. He's blessed us in such a way that He is not only a God that sits on a little stand in our house. He's not only a little statue that we look at and dust off every now and then, or that we put some food in front of in case He gets hungry but He never eats. He's not that God. Hallelujah. But He is a God that He can be our master. He is a God that can be our friend. He is a God that can be our father. He's a God that can be our husband.
Yes.
So today we are going to talk about, we've gone through Yahweh Adonai, Yahweh my master. We've gone through Yahweh Reah, Yahweh friend. And today we're going to talk about Yahweh Av, Yahweh my father. Yahweh my father. So, remember the basic things that we're doing. We're looking at the roles. We're looking at the qualities, which is going to entail the fruit as well. Things that take place as a result of being in this particular relationship. And we're also going to look at the examples. And these examples are going to both be on both sides. So we're going to give them on the side of the positive, when this relationship is working well. And we're also going to take it from the other side when these relationships are not working to the point that they should, or they're not in proper context. Thus, we're not getting the greatest examples or the greatest results. And so, we'll start off with this one as, again, Yahweh is our Father. And remember, this is all based out of what He said, and actually is in our reading for this week, which is where He says, Moshe says, "Who shall I say sent me?" And He says, Ayer Asher Ayer, I am that which I am. And remember, that simply means that I am everything that I will ever need to be. Okay? I don't ever have to reinvent myself. There's nothing new under the sun. There's no point in this world, time, your life, or anybody else's life that I am insufficient. Okay? There's no point that Yahweh is ever insufficient, because everything He will ever need to be, He was at the beginning.
Hallelujah.
And that's what He's saying to Moshe. When He says, I am that which I am, Moshe is trying to understand. I killed a man, threw him into the dust. Everybody knows about it. Now I've run away and hid for years, and I'm coming back to say, hey, I'm going to help y'all get out. And his response is, I am everything that you'll need, Moshe. So when you need a voice, I've already got that figured out. When you need a way through the wilderness, I already got that figured out. When you need somebody to go and stand before Pharaoh and touch his heart where you can't touch his heart, I've already got that figured out.
Hallelujah.
So Yahweh's response was letting Moshe know, educating Moshe on his completeness. His completeness, his totality. And right here, we're looking at the aspect of Yahweh as our Father. Yahweh as our Father. And so as we look, we begin simply with the roles in this relationship. The roles in this relationship. Yahweh is the Father. We are children. The qualities that you can see as a result of this relationship being intact. And we'll take it as we did with the master and the servant. So we're going to look at each role. So a father provides these things. The father is the source of these things. So the father is the source of provision, protection. The father is the source of instruction. And even taking instruction to another level. Because how many of you know when you go to school you get instruction? But that teacher simply gives you this information, instructs you on what to do. But the next level of that is what's done by a father. Guidance. Because I don't only give you the information, I take your hand and I walk with you. And I guide you so that you understand how the instruction impacts your life. And so we look to our Father for guidance. Now when we get off, we get a little rambunctious and lose our way and forget the instruction, right? Then we need correction. We need correction. We need to be back in line. Direction. We need direction. In that direction, that's just, if a father can't express direction for his child, for his family, for his house, then there's some problems. The father should be a source of love. The father should be a source of wisdom. The father should be a source of vision. Vision so that they understand where we are going long term. Where will we end up? Right? Also, these two next ones are huge. A father is a source of a legacy. He's the source of a legacy. As a result of what he instills in his son, in his daughter, in his children, in his household, a legacy is set forth. A legacy is simply something that surpasses your time. So as a result of what he has done, generations, what did Yahweh say to Abraham? Because of you, Abraham, generations, I will bless all the families of the earth. That's a legacy. There is evidence of a father's life when he leaves. That legacy is the evidence of the father's life when he leaves. He not only leaves memories, but he also leaves an inheritance. He leaves things of value to his son, to his daughter, to his children, right? Now, the role of the child and the qualities that we see that come in there. A child should be obedient. A child should be respectful. So there should come forth respect from that child as a result of this relationship being intact. This child has to be responsible because, remember, this child is receiving instruction, guidance, correction, direction, all of these things that they have to be a steward over. You have to be a steward over instruction, which means you are responsible for making sure that you are not bad soil. That as that father is sowing into you, that you are good soil. And so you have to be responsible. And in so many cases, the child has access to the wealth of the father, right? So the child has to be responsible and handle his father's affairs and his father's goods, his father's house, his father, anything concerning his father, typically that son has access to. So if he's not responsible, then that can present some problems. Now that child also has to be moldable. Why is that so important? Because truly when we're born, if you just let a child go and never offer instruction, correction, all these things that we listed with the father, then they're going to be wayward in a big way, right? They're going to, because they don't have anything that's helping to keep them on track. So if the child is not moldable, if the child is unable to be corrected and instructed and told and led, then there's a serious problem. So that child has to be moldable. That father has to be able to mold and shape that child. This child provides something that and as we go through this, you'll see that this is going to be really the biggest point that I drive with this whole thing. This child provides future and succession. That child provides future and succession. Because if not for the child, the father does what? He dies. And he cannot leave legacy or inheritance. Without this child, he cannot leave legacy or inheritance. So as a result of this, again, proper relationship, good balance in this relationship, this child is going to provide this father with a future. So, son, if I had not attained this goal, let me get you to where I was, and you now have an upper hand to go beyond me. That's something my father has always instilled in me. I am not your limit. I am where you start. This is where you begin. You go from here, so that now I can instill that in my son, and he becomes my future. He becomes my future. He is my succession. Okay? And so let's look at the father first. Let's look at father. And it's actually the first word, because the way the words are set up as you're going through the concordance is they're going by the first letter of the Aleph Bet to the second letter, so on and so forth. So like, you know, kind of similar to the way our dictionaries are set up. So because it's A-B, it's the first one. So H1, which is Av, Aleph Bet, Aleph Bet. And it means father of an individual, of God as father of his people, head or founder of a household, a group, a family, or a clan, an ancestor, a grandfather, forefather. All of these are examples. An originator or patron, producer or generator. Keep that in mind. Producer or generator. And so, number 9 also, ruler or chief. So at the head, this father is at the head. This Aleph and Bet, even if you look at what those letters, that Aleph representing what they would use was a head, an ox head. And so representing the strength in that ox head. And then also the Bet being the house. So the strength coming forth from the house comes from the father at the head. This father is the head, right? And so we then look at Bain, which is son. And again, just to clarify, that Bain would be used whether you're talking male or female when we're talking about children. So because we're talking about more than one, we're not specific. We're saying sons, which means all children. Sons, daughters. Bain, all children. And so Bain, H1121, this is, in the Brown Drivers Briggs definition, means son or grandson, child, member of a group, son or male child, grandson, children, when speaking plurally, again, male and female, young men, young women, And that can be of people or animals, being. And you can see down further it says people as in a nation. People as in a nation. Members of a guild or an order or a class is also another definition. Now it's a related word back to Banah. And in Banah, I found this very interesting. Just look at what this definition provides for us. It says to build or rebuild, establish, and look at the last one, cause to continue. Remember, this child is the source of succession. The child is the source of a future. The child is the reason that the father can live on, right? So that root word or not root word, this related word, banah, I thought was very, very special here to bring that out. And it's a verb, so this is an action word. Banah is an action word in building. So you are doing something. Something is being done. So, when we think about that, we are the children. He is the father. Shaul has a very interesting take on this, and I want to look at this because there are situations where people will say, well, I'm not Jewish, quote unquote, and so I am not a child of. And so the things that the children have to do, I don't have to do. But I'm adopted. So because I'm adopted, that means I then can participate in the inheritance and the legacy. Well, Shaul in Romans 8:14, we're going to read Romans 8:14 down to 19. Romans chapter 8 verse 14 down to verse 19. And it reads, for as many as are led by the Spirit of Elohim, these are sons of Elohim.
Hallelujah.
For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption,
That's right.
by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. Now, so that here he gives us and says, you've received the spirit of adoption. So now you can say, as a result of being a child, you can say Father.
Right.
You can now call Elohim Father because you have been adopted. So even if you don't believe that Jacob's blood runs through your veins, even if you don't believe that you're a part of the covenant promise that Abraham made, if you believe that he can give you the spirit of adoption, if you are willing to accept that, because the first thing he says is for as many as are led. So if you are led then, and you accept this adoption, there is no separation between the native born and the sojourner. And that particular sojourner being one that took on the mantle of Israel to say, your God will be my God and your people will be my people. If that declaration is made, you are no longer an outsider. So now the responsibility of the son is on you. You are Ben. You are Ben. You are the sons. And so let's read on, because that provides something for you. That provides something for you. Verse 16 says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of Elohim, and if children, also heirs. Yes. Truly heirs of Elohim. We are heirs of Elohim. And co-heirs with Messiah. If indeed we suffer with him, what does Israel mean? To reign with, to rule with. These are with. We are Israel because we are suffering. We are reigning with. We are contending with. Not against, but with. There's a difference. Not against, but with Yahweh. So if indeed we suffer with him, in order that we also be exalted together, for I reckon that the suffering of this present time are not worth comparing with the esteem that is to be revealed in us. For the intense longing of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim. All of creation is waiting for the sons to be revealed. Not the stepsons.
That's right.
Well, you better say it.
The sons.
That's right.
There is no separation. Either you are or you're not.
That's right.
So if we're responsible for the blessings, we're responsible for the obedience that it takes to get the blessing.
Hallelujah.
If we want to be an heir, if we want to receive an inheritance from our Father, then we do what our Father says do, because I will tell you something. They practice this today. You can go to an attorney and get this little paper drawn up. It's called a trust. And you can say in that trust, son A, you've always done well. When you turn 24, graduate from college, boom, it's all yours. Son B, you've given me a headache from your birth. So if you don't get your stuff together, at 24, you're going to get a little bit of this, and it will go for this. And if you're not graduated from college, then you don't get it. And if by the time you're 30, you will have to complete a drug test, you'll have to do this and you'll have to do that in order to get your inheritance. If any of these steps are failed, you get nothing. You can be disinherited. Why? Because you did not follow the instructions of your father. So if men today are smart enough to do this, what in the world makes us think that Yahweh, we can trick him and we can be disobedient, we can do nothing he says do, we can ignore every command, we can do what we want to do and say that by grace we're saved, and thus I will still get my part and I will still inherit your kingdom, whether you want me there or not, because I accepted Jesus.
Wow.
And because of my acceptance, you are, and I've heard this, so I'm not making this up, you are obligated. You are obligated, because it's in your word, to give me as an heir. I guarantee you this. It's really simple. It's really simple. Let's go to Deuteronomy. I'm gonna let the word say it. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18 to verse 21. When a man has a wayward and rebellious son, who is not listening to the voice of his father or to the voice of his mother, and who, when they have disciplined him, does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He is not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And let all Israel hear and fear. So if we think that we're going to steal away, if we think we're going to steal our way into the covenant of Abraham, we've got another thing coming. Because Yahweh already made provision for it. He wrote up this little document that says, if you, then I. It's a conditional document. I don't care what nobody tells you. If then is the textbook definition
That's right.
of a condition that has been set forth in an agreement.
That's right.
If then.
Right.
We cannot take Yahweh and take and steal his blessings while in our disobedience. We can't do it. Because he's a smart father. And he is not going to allow his inheritance to be squandered. His legacy
That's right.
to be completely tainted by an ungrateful and a wayward son. He won't allow it. He won't allow it. And so what we've got to do is understand our role a little bit better. And as the child, we have to understand what our responsibility to our Father is.
Hallelujah.
And y'all know I taught a lesson that was called Behaving Like a Child. It's been several months back. But understanding what it takes. What it takes. Why? Because as a child, we are moldable. As a child, Yahweh can chastise us. As a child, he can guide us and direct us. It's when we get too big for our britches that problems arise. And so Yeshua related this message to Nicodemus, as we would call him. In Hebrew, it would be Nakdimon. And in John chapter 3, verse 3, and we're going to run it down to verse 7. John chapter 3, verse 3 down to verse 7. And it says, Yeshua answered and said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born from above, he is unable to see the reign of Elohim. And in verse 4, Nicodemus said to him, how is a man able to be born when he is old? Is he able to enter into his mother's womb a second time and be born? Now, what's this whole idea of being born? Because who's born? Babies. We bear children, right? And so children are born. And as a result of having a child, you have an inheritance. And this is what he's describing. The reign of Elohim is the inheritance. The reign of Elohim is the inheritance. So let's go to verse 5. And Yeshua answered, truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he is unable to enter into the reign of Elohim. That which has been born of the flesh is flesh, and that which has been born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you have to be born from above. Yahweh has to be your father. You have to be as a child. Let's go to Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. We're going to read verse 1 through 4. Verses 1 through 4. Matthew chapter 18, verse 1 through 4. At that time, the taught ones came to Yeshua, saying, who then is the greatest in the reign of the heavens? Again, remember that reign, that is the inheritance. And in verse 2, and Yeshua called a little child to him, set him in their midst, and said, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. Whoever then humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the reign of the heaven. Now, what makes that so important? Because when we went through the characters, the character or the, where is it? Let me go back to the beginning because I know I'll run into it. Oh yeah, there it is. When we went through these qualities, that child is obedient, respectful, responsible, moldable, and provides that father with a future. And so if we can come in this fashion, then we can inherit. Why? Because a father leaves his legacy and his inheritance to his children. Not just some stranger, just somebody walking around. Hey, you, come over here. He leaves that legacy and inheritance to his children. So unless we come as a child of Elohim, then we can't inherit his reign, because guess what? We're not in line for that inheritance.
That's right.
Y'all know, and I know somebody, a whole lot of people, because there's a lot of people in this world. It's a lot of people that die every single day. And every now and then, it's somebody that died that's worth a whole lot of money.
Right.
But guess who that doesn't make a difference to right now? Me. Because I am not in line for that person, whoever that person's legacy is, and whoever that inheritance goes to, makes no difference to me, because I am not in line with being an inheritor. And so we can't just assume, just because we're of the human race and that we say we love you, God, that we're automatically going to get an inheritance.
Right.
You know him. But it's not good enough to just know him.
Hallelujah.
It's not good enough to know him.
Okay.
We know all kinds of people. It means nothing. You can't take it to the bank. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that. And so there's something so special that a father knows that is done through that child. And it's this. It's this. Think about this, y'all. The greatest form of grace is time. Now, how can I say that? Because what did Yahweh say? In the day that man sinned, he shall surely die. In the day, what does that entail? Time. That entails time. He is saying, in the day you sin, you die. In that day. So, grace is allowing that day to pass while you are still alive. Right? So, now we go to the scriptural definition of time. We know that no man ever lived longer than 1,000 years. We know Methuselah got the closest. He lived 969 years, right? So what is that saying to us? Let me ask you this. Did Adam have a son? Yes. As a result, generations are the greatest extension of that time. Think about that. The greatest form of grace is the extension of time. Generations are the greatest extension of time, because guess who's still alive? Adam.
Oh, yes.
Almost 6,000 years later, and Adam is still living through us. So Yahweh gave grace. This is how awesome Yahweh is. He knew we would fall. And so before we fell, he created a way of escape. He created redemption. He created a way for us to get back up. One of the most important ways that he created that is to have a father, to have a son. Something as simple as that. Because now, what does that father do? What does that father do, y'all? Let's go back to our list. Let's go back to our list real quick. So this father, let's hope I'm at the right one. Okay, this father provides. protects, instructs, guides, corrects, directs, loves, gives wisdom, vision, and legacy and inheritance to his children.
Thank you, Father.
So as a result, this child, through the Son, the Father lives on. Because what he has given now, the Son continues. He provides the future. The Son provides the future. So, what do they say? You reap what you sow, right? So if you sow it, that's what's coming back. You can't plant an apple tree and expect orange groves to pop up, right? And so if that Father sows properly into that Son, he, through the Son, will live on. His legacy will live on. And he can feel good about leaving his Son his inheritance. And so, truly, the greatest form of grace is time, and generations, children are the greatest extension of that time. So let's look at some examples now. Great father-child relationships. We'll look at Abraham and Yitzhak. And I want to look at this from Yasher, from the book of Yasher, because it goes into great detail as to the heart of Abraham and Yitzhak in the midst of what we know as being probably one of the greatest tests of a father, to take the life of his son and offer it to Yahweh. It goes into great detail. So let's look at this. And this is there's a few different versions and chapters how Yasher is set up. The I guess more common one, this will be the 22nd chapter. And we'll start at the 51st verse, and we'll read down just a bit. And because I know this is probably a less read source, we're gonna do a bit of reading so that we can get everything that's in there. Because I know that a lot of us may not be familiar with the passage, so I want to make sure that we have an understanding of what it's saying. So again, we're going to read Yasher chapter 22, starting at verse 51, and I apologize, but it will be a bit of reading. And so it reads, "And now that his son Isaac is born to him, he has forsaken thee." And let me give some backdrop. I'm sorry. This is Hasatan. Remember Job. Remember how Hasatan came to Yahweh about Job. Well, the same scenario happened with Abraham. Hasatan accused Abraham of forgetting about Yahweh. And he said, hey, he's 37 years old at this time, Isaac. He forgot about you because you blessed him and gave him what he wanted 37 years ago. So now you're the last thing on his mind. And so he really was in a position where, being Hasatan, he wanted to, again, his whole plight is getting back at Adam. So, Abraham being the friend of Yahweh, of course, he's attacking him. Yes. So I'll read on. "And now that his son Isaac is born to him, he has forsaken thee. He has made a great feast for all the inhabitants of the land, and the Lord he has forgotten. For amidst all that he has done, he brought thee no offering, neither burnt offering, nor peace offering, neither ox, lamb, nor goat, of all that he killed on the day that his son was weaned. Even from that time of his son's birth till now, being 37 years, he built no altar before thee, nor brought any offering to thee, for he saw that thou didst give what he requested before thee, and he therefore forsook thee. And the Lord said to Satan, Hast thou thus considered my servant Abraham? For this is not like him upon earth. For there is none like him upon earth, a perfect and an upright man before me, one that feareth God, one that feareth Elohim, and avoideth evil. As I live, were I to say unto him, Bring up Yitzhak thy son before me, he would not withhold him from me. Much more if I told him to bring up a burnt offering before me from his flock or herds. And Satan answered Yahweh and said, Speak then now unto Abraham, as thou hast said, and thou wilt see whether he will not this day transgress and cast aside thy word. In chapter 23, at that time the word of Yahweh came to Abraham, and he said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son whom thou lovest, even Yishak, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which shall be shown to you. For there wilt thou see a cloud and the glory of Yahweh. And Abraham said within himself, How shall I separate my son Yishak from Sarai, his mother, in order to bring him up for a burnt offering before Yahweh? His first thought wasn't, why are you doing this, Yahweh? It was, how am I going to do this?
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Right.
And make no mistakes about it, he loved his son.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to give y'all one piece of backdrop before I move on as well. In an earlier conversation between brothers, between Ishmael and Yishak, Isaac, Ishmael seemed to be concerned for his brother, that he was not being submissive to Yahweh, that he did not know Yahweh. And so, Yitzhak was like, wait a minute, yeah, I'm straight, big brother, I'm good. I mean, I'm good. If Yahweh was to require my life of me, I would lay it down willingly. So that's what he said to his brother, so y'all know who was listening on, right? Yeah, that's in Yasher as well. That's a little earlier in Yasher. But I wanted you to have that backdrop, so you have the understanding and the mindset of Abraham and the understanding and mindset of Isaac or Yishak. So I'm going to start over. I'll start again in verse 4 in chapter 23, verse 4. And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before Sarah, his wife. And he spoke these words to her. My son Yitzhak is grown up, and he has not for some time studied the service of his God. Now, tomorrow I will go and bring him to Shem and Eber, his son. And there he will learn the ways of Yahweh. For they will teach him to know Yahweh, as well as to know that when he prayeth continually before Yahweh, he will answer him. Therefore there he will know the way of serving Yahweh, his Elohim. I put that twice. Okay, so now I'm going to skip down to verse 50. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, Behold, I see here the fire and wood. And where then is the lamb that is to be the burnt offering before Yahweh? And Abraham answered his son Yitzhak, saying, Yahweh has made choice of thee, my son, to be perfect, a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb. And Yitzhak said unto his father, I will do all that Yahweh spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart. And Abraham again said unto Yitzhak his son, Is there in thy heart any thought of or counsel concerning this, which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee. O my son, conceal it not from me. And Yitzhak answered his father Abraham and said unto him, O my father, as Yahweh liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate either to the right or to the left from the word that he has spoken to thee. Neither limb nor muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there in my heart any thought of or evil counsel concerning this. But I am of joyful and cheerful heart in this matter. And I say, blessed is Yahweh, who has this day chosen me to be a burnt offering before him. And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Yitzchak, and they went on and came together to that place that Yahweh had spoken of.
Hallelujah.
Verse 61, and Yitzchak said to his father, bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and thereof profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so. He was concerned not that this would hurt, but he was concerned that he would make himself unacceptable. 62, and Yitzchak still said to his father, O my father, when thou shalt have slain me and burnt me for an offering, take with thee that which shall remain of my ashes, to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, this is the sweet smelling savor of Isaac. But do not tell her this if she shall sit near a well or upon any high place, lest she should cast her soul after me and die. And Abraham heard the words of Yitzchak, and he lifted up his voice and wept when Yitzchak spoke these words. And Abraham's tears gushed down upon Yitzchak his son. And Isaac wept bitterly. And he said to his father, hasten thou, O my father, and do with me the will of Yahweh our Elohim, as he has commanded thee. And the hearts of Abraham and Yitzchak rejoiced at this thing which Yahweh had commanded them. But the eye wept bitterly, whilst the heart rejoiced.
Hallelujah.
This is a father who taught a son the fear of Yahweh.
Yes. Yes.
That not only did it take, see, if we get it twisted, first of all, we get the twisting that he was a little kid and that he was just fooled into coming. Right? It takes on a whole different picture. 37. I'm not even 37 yet. I got good sense. And I think I would have been like Isaac, and I would have figured out. You told them to stay back there. I still don't see the lamb. I see all them sharp objects in your hand. You got me building. I mean, this is how crucial it was. Abraham came weak. He was so weak he couldn't continue building the altar. And you know what Isaac did? He stepped up and built the altar on which he himself was going to be offered. He built the altar that he himself was going to be offered on. This is a son that has been fathered. And this is a father who loves his son. This is a father who says that I, being the child of Elohim, will be obedient to your every word, and I will teach my son the same. So even when your word may not look good, feel good, taste good, I taught my son to be obedient even unto death. Does that sound familiar? A father that teaches a son the fear of Yahweh. And we all know that the father stepped in and said, I have provided a way of escape.
Hallelujah.
And it was the obedience of a child that was able to then portray to his child what obedience is. And we saw the same thing reflecting back and forth. The same thing. While Abraham's being obedient to Yahweh as a child is to his father, Isaac is being obedient to his father. Notice, he didn't say the word that you spoke to me, Yahweh. He said the word that Yahweh spoke to you, Father. Yahweh spoke that word to to Abraham. And Isaac trusted the word through his father.
Hallelujah.
So let's look at not such a great father-child relationship. David and Absalom. Absalom was something, y'all. This joker. So let's read 2 Samuel 14. We're going to go verse 25 and 26. To avoid going through the entire thing, I am going to skip around a little bit. Because this, you can pick the scriptures up and you can read this. Read chapters, start at 2 Samuel chapter 10 and read forward. We're going to start at 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 25 and 26. And in all of Israel, there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks.
See?
From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he cut the hair of his head, for it was at every year's end that he cut it, but because it was heavy on him, when he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels by the sovereign's weight. Now, this brother here, as we would call, had the big head, right? He had the big head. And so, to remember the backdrop and understand that he killed his brother, he lured his brother, killed his brother, without permission from his father, without consulting his father. His brother did wrong. Let's not take that away. Amnon did wrong. He humbled Tamar, the sister of Absalom. And Absalom got revenge. He lured him, killed him. But instead of facing his father, instead of talking to his father, he decided that he would go ahead and do this in his own way. He was going to handle it like he was going to handle it. And so created a real strained relationship between Absalom and David. And so let's go on now to chapter 15. We're going to read down a little bit, starting at verse 1. Chapter 15, verse 1. And it came to be after this that Absalom prepared a chariot and horses for himself, and 50 men to run before him. Now notice how many times it said himself, for him. He prepared a chariot of horses for himself, and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. And it came to be, whenever anyone, now understand the gate being the head of the government of the land, which would be where David would be, right? And so he came before the gate. He stood beside the way to the gate. And it came to be, whenever anyone who had a complaint came to the sovereign, who did they come to?
Sovereign.
They came to the sovereign for right ruling, that Absalom, now is Absalom the sovereign?
Yes.
Okay. That Absalom would call to him and say, psst, 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 come here. What city are you from?
See?
And when he said, your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel, Absalom would say to him, man, look, your matters are good and right, but you have nobody from the sovereign to hear you. In other words, they're all tied up and busy. I mean, but I'm here. I'm chilling. I'm not doing nothing right now. So verse 4, and Absalom would say, oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any complaint or case would come to me, and I shall let right be done to him.
Wow.
Sounds like this dude, one of the first politicians. Just elect me. Oh, that I were made judge.
Right.
I can make you all these promises. Verse 5, and it came to be, whenever anyone came near him to bow down to him, that he would not tell them to get up because I'm not the king, but he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. So what was he doing? Verse 6, and Absalom did this to all Israel who came to the sovereign for right ruling, and Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Now, if you finish reading that and going through it, what you'll realize is that he stole the kingdom. So what do you have here? You have a father who is ready to leave an inheritance to his children, and one child that says, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get what I know doesn't belong to me. Even though I know I am not supposed to rule over this kingdom, I know that, but I'm going to figure out how to take it anyway. So he did. He did. And long story short, all that hair that he probably was just about to cut was the reason he died. Was the reason it says he got caught in a thicket and he was suspended between heaven and earth. Just in a tree. His donkey was down the road, or his horse was down the road still running. And they said, oh man, that dude just hanging over there. Just, well, thank you, Yahweh. That's done. And I'm going to use this point real quick, just for a sidebar. Just for a sidebar. I looked up that weight, that 200 shekels, I think is what it said.
Yes.
It's really, 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 really heavy for hair. The only texture of hair that I can imagine that could get that heavy, by the way, and I did the math, in order for it to be not like 15 feet long, it would have to be what we would call dreadlocks. In order for it not to be, if we're talking, a stringy sort of texture of hair, it would have to be 15 feet long. And so I don't think he walked around. He wouldn't have waited that long. He wouldn't have waited that long to cut it. He cut it once a year, and if it was 15 feet, he'd have probably cut it. Especially, even if he was 6-7 feet tall man. Good gracious. So, but that is an example. Probably the man was looking like you and me, especially being that his brother Shlomo said, "I am black and lovely."
Right.
And so this is a little bit of history for us. So one more not so great father-child relationship. That was when a child went wayward, right? This is where the father messed up.
Yeah.
Child ain't have no chance because the father didn't give him what he needed. And so Eli and his sons Hophni and Phinehas. And so Eli, we know, was the high priest. He was the priest, and he was who trained up Samuel. He was who Samuel came up under. So we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 2 again. In order to not read everything, I'm going to skip around just a bit. So we're going to go chapter 2, verse 12. And it says, "And the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They did not know Yahweh." But they were priests, y'all.
Wow.
People were bringing their sacrifices to these folks. They were priests. Verse 17. "And the sin of the young men was very great before Yahweh, for the men despised the offering of Yahweh." They figured out a scheme to get the good and the offer to jump. They figured out a way. It was get rich. They had all kind of goods and stuff. They was eating good, all kind of stuff. And so let's go to chapter 2, verse 22. Start at verse 22, read to 25, then we'll jump a little bit more. So it reads, "And Eli was very old and had heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were assembling at the door of the tent of meeting. And he said to them, why do you do deeds like these? Now, it says he was very old, right? Remember that. So back in verse 23. For I hear of your evil deeds. I hear of your evil deeds. I hear of your evil deeds from all the people. Know, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear, making the people of Yahweh trespass. If one man sins against another, Elohim shall judge him. But if a man sins against Yahweh, who shall pray for him? But they did not listen to the voice, though Yahweh was pleased to put them to death. Now, he's old, right? So it's been going on for a while. And he talking about he hearing it from the people. Well, where in the world you at? You couldn't see none of this?
I know this.
You got to hear this bad report from the people. Oh, so when it gets bad enough that people talking about it, now you got to do something about it. That's not a great father. Chapter 2, still verse 30. Verse 30. And we're going to read 30 down to 35. Therefore Yahweh Elohim of Israel declares, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father will walk before me forever. Why? Because this is the line of priests.
Thank you.
Come on, Eli. But now Yahweh declares, far be it from me, for those who highly esteem me I highly esteem, and those who despise me are lightly esteemed. See, the days are coming that I shall cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, so that an old man shall not be found in your house. And you shall see an enemy in my dwelling place, despite all the good which Elohim does for Israel. And there shall not be an old man in your house forever. Early death. 33. But any of your men, now you're going to have men, but look how they exist. But any of your men whom I do not cut off from my altar is to consume your eyes and grief your life, and all the increase of your house die as men. And this is the sign to you that comes upon your two sons, upon Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they are going to die, both of them. And I shall raise up for myself a trustworthy priest who does according to what is in my heart and in my being. And I shall build him a steadfast house, and he shall walk before my anointed, before my anointed forever. Verse 36. And it shall be that and it shall be that everyone who is left in your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a cake of bread, and say, please put me in one of the priestly positions to eat a piece of bread. Now let me explain what's happening there. He is saying that, let me say, Samuel, who is being brought up right now, and if you read this, some of the verses that I'm jumping past are talking about how Samuel is growing up, and he's in favor with Yahweh and with man, and it'll just pepper in, and Samuel is finding favor, and Samuel. Samuel is from the house of Ephraim. Guess what? That's not a priestly tribe. So here Yahweh is bringing in Ephraim, who represents the fullness of the nations, right? And says to Yehuda, I will remove you from your place and make you bow down before your brother Ephraim and ask him to put you back in your place. Read that verse 36 again. And it shall be that everyone who is left of your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a cake of bread, and say, please. Now, you're the authority. You are the priest. You are the Levite. You're the Levite, and you are going to Ephraim to say, put me in one of the priestly positions. You are already supposed to be there. Put me in one of the priestly positions to eat a piece of bread. Chapter 3, verse 1. And the young Shemuel was serving Yahweh before Eli. And the word of Yahweh was rare in those days.
Wow.
No vision breaking forth. What does the Father provide? Vision. There is no vision coming forth. It says the word of Yahweh was rare. This is on Eli's watch, y'all. And it came to be in that day that Eli was lying down in his place, and his eyes had begun to grow so dim that he was unable to see. No vision. How can he instruct? How can he direct? How can he provide wisdom? How can he give correction? How can he do any of this? His eyes are growing dim. And in verse 3 it says, and the lamp of Elohim had not gone out in the Hekel of Yahweh, where the ark of Elohim was. And Shemuel was lying down to sleep. And the lamp of Elohim had not gone out in the Hekel. Yahweh still provided for himself a son that would obey him.
Yeah.
And so in that, he provided a future that the place of Yahweh, the light did not go out. Even when the father dropped the ball, even though Eli dropped the ball, Yahweh still provided for himself through the son of this woman and this man who were barren for years. And their promise was that if you give us a son, we will give him back to you. And they gave their son to the service of the temple, even though he was from Ephraim, and that was not his responsibility. He wasn't supposed to. I can't say that that was a glamorous thing, that you just leave and somebody else is raising your son and you got to do all of this and all the other kids out there playing ball, right? That sort of scenario. But Yahweh knew that in Samuel, he could have the son that would obey the father, him as the father. And so that gives us again another example of where that father-son scenario was not the greatest. But if we remember our role, Yahweh will always provide. He will always protect. He will always instruct us. He will always guide us, correct us, direct us, love us, give us wisdom, have a vision for us. He will always provide a legacy and an inheritance. Always is it available. The question is, will we be obedient? Will we be respectful? Will we be responsible? Will we be moldable? Will we be Samuel or will we be Hephni and Phineas? Will we provide our Father with a future? Amen.
This is my desire to honor